Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Monday, April 1st, 2019 City Council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Condon.
Here.
Alderman Vine.
Here.
Alderman Mahavik.
Here.
Alderman Curry.
Here.
Alderman Schaefer.
Here.
Alderman Glad.
Here.
Alderman Sid.
Here.
Mayor Jack.
Here. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any member of the public that would wish to address the council at this time? See none. Moving on to the consent agenda, item 5. I'm looking for a motion to approve items 5A. Or would you like to pull? Actually, is any council member would like to pull any items from this consent agenda? No. I'm looking for a motion to approve 5A through 5F. Alderman Curry?
So moved.
Second, Alderman Santee?
Second motion.
Thank you. Discussion on these items? Alderman Santee?
Public Works Director Schmidt, what's the difference between those two types of the asphalt and the binder mixture?
What's the difference between the two mixtures?
Yeah.
That's what we use in the Public Works crew. That's the asphalt we buy. The binder is the first level, and the surface coat is the final coat that goes on top of the binder.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? See none? Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Curry.
Yes.
Alderman Santee.
Yes.
Alderman Glad.
Yes.
Alderman Schaefer.
Yes.
Alderman Mahavik.
Yes.
Alderman Vine.
Yes.
Alderwoman Condon.
Yes.
Thank you, Council. The first action item is discussion regarding an approval of a sign variance to D.R. Horton to allow off-site advertising signage at the southeast corner of Veterans Parkway and South Route 31 for a period not to exceed 2 years, or when the final certificate of occupancy is issued for the Oaks of Irish Prairie subdivision. Ross, can you please present this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Community Development Department received a sign variance request to allow an off-site development sign for the Oaks at Irish Prairie subdivision. The developer, D.R. Horton, and the property owner, Prairie Point Land Development Corporation, have an agreement in place pending the City Council approval. The developer is here to answer any questions that I cannot answer them for you, so looking for an approval on this.
Thank you, Ross. Any discussion by council on this item? Alderman Santee?
Are the signs going to be lit?
No.
Okay. And there is a couple of questions. There's a permit fee, correct? And that is?
There's a sign variance fee that had to be paid prior to the request, and then there is a permit fee as well, yes.
And does the petitioner, is this a form of advertising that you do? I mean, do you do billboards also? I mean, basically you're doing a billboard.
You can just state your name for public record.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Derek Hoffman with D.R. Horton. This is a traditional type of advertising that we do. I think the main purpose of this sign, given that our model location is located approximately a little over a half a mile from 31 and Veterans Parkway, it's more of a directional sign to make sure people can get into the site and they know where to ingress to get to the model.
If you weren't able to take an option like this, though, do you guys, do you often do any kind of billboard advertising or try to get something around your locations?
We do. Obviously, renting a billboard sign is considerably more expensive.
Understood. Understood. One quick thing, I guess this goes to Director Palarecki. Who's the owners of Prairie Point? Is
It's a corporation, so there's multiple owners.
there's multiple owners? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's
I mean,
fine.
it's, and I did request that D.R. Horton go to them prior to, so that if they said no, then basically this was a mute issue, so.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Alderman Glad?
Yeah, I have no problem with the sign there. The only question I got is, do we really need to make it 2 years or when the final certificate of occupancy comes up, or just when they can apply for the final permit?
Well, right, so, I mean, it just gives me, or us as the city, the option or the, if there's no lots left to sell in the subdivision, at that point, because I could give a permit, but that doesn't mean that the home is sold. So
Right, but if they,
typically,
they get the permit to build the house, in most cases, it's because it's sold.
no, not in D.R. Horton's case. D.R. Horton builds spec homes.
Uh-huh.
So they could have 20 homes in the ground, ready to be sold, not sold, with the permits issued.
Okay, well, the occupancy comes when the house is sold, or when, it's finished?
When the permit is finalized out, but typically they go for occupancy.
Well, we'll go for occupancy once it meets village code, city code,
Right.
obviously. But that could be at any point during the construction cycle. So we may have a home that we pull a CO on that we haven't sold yet. In this case, the sign would be removed even before that home is sold. But I think the certificate of occupancy gives us a good benchmark to where we're sort of at the end of the project, and then we would get the sign removed.
So then actually the occupancy is kind of midway between the two, so that's fine. I have no more problems, no more questions. Thank you.
Any other questions by council? Alderman
Just to
Curry?
clarify, I think I read this correctly, but it's 2 years or, so,
Whichever is first.
okay, so at this point, so the longest at this point would be 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
If,
Alderman Sandy?
yeah, if Prairie Point were to sell that property though, now you guys, I assume you have some kind of deal set with them that they're gonna tell you, hey, sign's gotta get out of there, right?
Correct, so as part of our lease agreement with them, if they were to sell the property, then we'd have to remove the sign.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Any other? Thank you, Derek, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a public statement on this item? See none? At this time, I'm looking for a motion by council to approve sign variance for D.R. Horton to allow an off-site advertising signage at the southeast corner of Veterans Parkway and South Route 31 for a period not to exceed 2 years, or when the final certificate of occupancy is issued for the Oaks of Irish Prairie subdivision. Alderman McHenry?
Make that motion.
Second. Alderman Santi?
I'll second the motion.
Discussion on this item? Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Mahevik?
Yes.
Alderman Santi?
Yes.
Alderwoman Condon?
Yes.
Alderman Devine?
Yes.
Alderman Curry?
Yes.
Alderman Schaper?
Yes.
Alderman Glad?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Thank you, Derek, appreciate it. The next item on the agenda, I'm looking for a motion by council, but I'll kind of explain this item. Is this to table a consideration incentive agreement between the city of McHenry and Bluestone Single Tenant Properties LLC to the April 15th, 2019 city council meeting. I have reached out to Mr. Heidner, and he's been on vacation, spring break. He gets back on Wednesday, so we're either meeting in person or over the phone to discuss this issue. So we've been emailing back and forth. So on Wednesday night, we should have some kind of idea of what's really happening with the site. He does know the concerns. I did email him those, so I would ask that council just motion to table this item until the April 15th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second, Alderman Curry.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Condon?
Yes.
Alderman Curry?
Yes.
Alderman Santi?
Yes.
Alderman Glad?
Yes.
Alderman Schaper?
Yes.
Alderman Mahevik?
Yes.
Alderman Devine?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Next item on the agenda is discussion regarding the process for filling the city clerk vacancy. Go ahead and pass it over to you, David.
And passing out, start with, maybe we can follow this, everybody can understand where we're going. Since we have 2 people interested tomorrow, then copies of it as well. Because this will dribble over from this city council to the next one as well. Actually, it'll be a waterfall into the next one. So this is kind of the history, the short history of the city clerk situation. Janice was here during some year, and her term ended, I believe, in 2017, which is an odd year, consolidated election, municipal election, spring of 17. Lindsay came in, elected in 17, and her term would have ended with the mayor's term in 2021. And she left, I think, sometime in the fall of 17. And that's when Marcy took over her role as the existing deputy city clerk. She was probably appointed by the way our city code read in the past was that the city clerk was the one who was authorized to appoint a deputy clerk, not the city council, not the mayor. It was a deputy. He was the city clerk. So Janice, or even her predecessor, might have appointed Marcy as the deputy city clerk. So she performed those duties when Lindsay left and created a vacancy. So there was a vacancy in the clerk's office at that point in time. Marcy started working, and then so let's just go back. So when Lindsay vacated her seat, there was a lot of time left in her term, from 17 to 21. What we should have done was we should have placed her on this ballot tomorrow, because there was that amount of time left, and we would have filled her vacancy for the remaining 2 years tomorrow. Instead, what we did was in February of 18, so about 5 months into Marcy's term as the deputy city clerk, we adopted this ordinance, and it was done deliberately at the time for a few reasons that we discussed as a group, and you can remember this once you see it. This was an ordinance that authorized the deputy city clerk under our home rule to perform the duties of the deputy city clerk was authorized to perform the duties of the city clerk, which is a legitimate move by a home rule municipality, at least through tomorrow. What happens after tomorrow, I don't know, because there's no law on it, but it's still a authorized seat, authorized position in that seat, and has the formality of the city clerk and authorized by the city council to do so. So I think we're fine, but we need to make a decision what we're doing with the city clerk's position. And we've been wrestling with this since Sue's term. I don't think it dipped back into Pam's. I think it was during Sue's, we discussed it a lot. Do we want an elected city clerk, or do we want an appointed city clerk? And villages are different than cities, regardless of being home rule. Villages have a right to have an appointed clerk. We don't. In order for us to go from an elected position in a city, home rule or not, to an appointed position, you need to have a referendum pass. So if you keep following my memo here, so Marcy was in the spring of 18, we adopt this ordinance. So she continues to operate as the deputy city clerk with these powers. And then she creates a vacancy in that position by leaving in the fall of 18. And then Deb comes in and continues that deputy city clerk under this ordinance, and she'll now be leaving shortly in 2019. So that's really not the issue I'm addressing tonight. What I'm addressing are the options. So we have 4 options the way I see it. The mayor can appoint to the vacancy under the statute, even today. He could say, I'm going to recommend so-and-so for the vacated position, and that person will now, given what we haven't done, will fill that position through the end of the city clerk's term. And you can leave the deputy clerk with her powers there or without the powers, or adjust them since you have a filled position. I don't see any usefulness of that at all. I think our ordinance is legitimate and the deputy clerk serves the purpose, but it's a possibility. Number 2 is you could leave the deputy clerk there without appointing to the vacancy, as I just mentioned. 3 is we can have a referendum prepared, but we need to, if we're gonna go for a referendum to go to an appointed position as opposed to an elected position, we need to do it before the end of 2020, because at that point in time, the ballot's set for 2021, and you're either gonna appoint to an elected, or you're either gonna go for an elected clerk, or it won't even be on the ballot at all, because you won the referendum to go for an appointed clerk. So that means we need to present that referendum at an earlier election, either the fall of this year or sometime in 2020, we need to see what election, a referendum can be run at, and I haven't done that yet. And the fourth option is to leave the elected vacancy status quo until the spring of '21, and then run the election again, fill the position. Those are probably the four possibilities. And again, we don't have to decide tonight, but we have to stop kicking it around because it's really frustrating.
Alderman Craig?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. And I guess I'm the one that kind of precipitated some of this most recently, but in February, I ran across this issue, and I was really looking up. There was a question that came up, which is addressed by this ordinance, as to the deputy clerk, and because it occurred that, well, we didn't have a city clerk, and our ordinance calls for, as the one that you look at online, calls for only the clerk can appoint. So I was questioning that.
And also during the election contest.
Well, and when David got this, I was relieved because I was concerned. My biggest concern at the time was things like, signed, they're like the Meyer agreements and things like that. Is there any loopholes, any openings? And I was getting a little concerned about that. So that was good. But in the process of going through that, I ran across the and I forget what I'd sent it to you, but I forget what the statute number was. But there's a state statute that addresses what David just talked about, which is if a vacancy in a 4-year term, so that would include any of us too, occurs more than 28 months before the end of the term and more than 130 days before an election, it must appear on the next election. And so my concern with this is that, and of course by the time we saw that in late February, it's too late. We couldn't get an election tomorrow anyway. So it's too late to actually fix it, I guess you could say. But it is intent or no intent. It is a situation where, in one way, we've sort of deprived the voters of the opportunity to either run for or vote for a city clerk, which is still an elected position. And so, to me, that's a pretty big concern. So, I guess my comment was a couple of weeks ago was, I think we should immediately appoint a clerk, because it's like, what did you know, and when did you know, and what'd you do about it? It's like, that's the best thing we could do to right the situation. So that would be my opinion, which would be, I guess, option one.
Right.
And then you would still have to put, if you want to try for an appointed clerk, you'd still have to put it on the November 20 election. Probably, I assume that's the election. That'd be the next possibility, to get it approved by the voters to have an appointed position rather than elected. Otherwise, you're facing having an elect again in
4 more years.
For another 4 years,
Right.
because you can't do it, you can't eliminate the term in the middle. So that's what so to me, you've got to do, if you want to go to an appointed clerk, I just feel like we got to do 1 and 3. That's my opinion.
If you're gonna do the appointed clerk, then I think you need to readdress this ordinance, because there'll be.
Oh, yeah, you'd have to clean that up, sure, at the same time. Now, other people sitting here, not me, are gonna make the decision whether to go for this or not. I personally think that there's value to having an elected city clerk position, and I realize it's a difficult position, and I realize a lot of people, it's a tough position to get people to run for, I think, and all that. I understand all that. But, I think that the issue is that, or some, at the very least, then something else has got to change, because if we have an electoral commission or something like that, it should be elected positions that are sitting in judgment. That's the way I feel. But again, others are probably going to make that decision whether to go for a referendum or not at that time. But I think from my standpoint right now, we should appoint a clerk. This is the best thing we can do with where we're at.
Alderwoman Condon?
Just for clarification, are we in any violation by not having it on the, I know there's things that we can do about tomorrow, but are we in any violation?
You know, the agency's a funny thing. When you get to officers, you can have somebody that's called de jure, which means you've met all the requirements of being an elected officer. And then you have what the courts call de facto officers, where if you're not quite perfected, you're performing the role, everything you did is legit. And like he said, corrected at some point in time. You know, courts understand flaws. And all I can say of that would be our argument is that this was a de facto officer and we did it home rule, which makes it darn close to de jure, which means, you know, formally perfect. So I don't think there's a problem, but there's no way to predict what a judge would do.
All right, so with that said, I agree with everything that Alderman Curry said. I think that the mayor should appoint someone for the remainder of this term to 2021. And, you know, years ago, we also had an elected treasurer position, and
That's the one we wrestled over. We spent a lot of time on that issue.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And, so we did eliminate that. I could go back and forth on still today whether that was a good decision or not. But because of the amount of documentation that the clerk is responsible for, I agree. I believe that we need to maintain that. So again, like Alderman Curry said, I won't be here to make that decision. Others will be here. But I would hope that we would retain that position. So not choose 3, but 4, and leave the, well, it wouldn't be leaving the vacancy because it would be appointed, but have it out for our election in 2021 for another city clerk. That would be, you know, what, and I base that not just on, you know, just for the heck of it, but I've seen all the documentation, and there is a lot more work to it than, you know, even in the time that I've been here, the various city clerks, you know, it's not just these meetings, it's the committee meetings. There's a lot of responsibility that needs to go into that, along with, as Harry noted, all of the contracts and everything else that are signed. So I would hope that that position stayed as an elected position. I think that helped carry some of the weight of the responsibility.
You can't tell me they have a lot of people to do it.
Well, they pretty much, so this deputy clerk position would handle signatures and
City clerk.
City clerk, sorry. Where did I say? My bad. Would handle the city council's meetings, committee meetings, right, and then the signatures. Pretty much the duties of city clerk.
Well, it's actually all the records.
All the records
Right.
are responsible.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jerry's got it correct. It's significant, and you have to watch this. Usually, I mean, all cities do it differently. But the city clerk, if you're not gonna pay them to do that, then they expect you to have someone behind it doing that work. So that person is the one responsible. The city clerk's formal position, but it's hard to hold them accountable because you don't pay them to do that.
Right.
It's a tough.
Right, and I think that's what we battled before, and that's why we came up with a paid deputy clerk.
Right.
Correct.
I agree.
I think I was just gonna say, it was before my time, but you all remember, I think we've seen a swing here, maybe not from one extreme to another, but when Kathy was here, Kunzer, I think she spent more time here as the city clerk, and was responsible for a lot more day-to-day things while she was here. And then that kind of swung with Janice to the opposite, where obviously she came to the meetings, she did the meeting, but then delegated the day-to-day responsibilities of the, because for whatever we pay a month for this city.
It's $4,800 for the year, $400 a month, plus $75 a week.
that's what the city clerk elected position makes. She delegated those responsibilities to Marcy at the time, the deputy clerk, and other people. They were kind of distributed to a lot of different people when Janice came in. So we've seen kind of the swing, you know, both here in the last 15 years at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, as far as the treasurer went, I think it was pretty obvious that the treasurer was just there to sign a couple documents and that was it. So you really, probably discussed it a lot more than we needed to at that time. I agree with, both Alderman Condon and, Alderman Curry that, like you said, that, we do need to appoint somebody, you know, ASAP. And we probably should, you know, recommend that, again, it's gonna be a future council that's gonna decide that for the referendum, but we do need an elected official. I think it's important that we have that elected official. The only thing is I think before the elections were to come up, I think Administrator Warfield brought that up, as far as compensation, we need to look at that and see if that's where it needs to be. You know, you don't want somebody to jump into that position just because of money. You want somebody that's gonna be dedicated to the position, and again, you know, that somebody isn't waiting just to jump in because of the money, and isn't fair, you know, for what they have to do. Or is it overpaid, or is it underpaid? I think we need to look at that and have somebody, again, down in the near future, look at that, finance personnel, and just move forward from there.
I guess my final 2 cents in it too, just as a keep in mind, is the deputy clerk is also, I strongly feel the need to at least maintain that position with someone also for day-to-day record keeping, but also that position for us is the Freedom of Information Act officer, the Open Meetings Act officer, you know, so they deal with the liquor licenses and raffle licenses, you know, through the mayor's office and the admin office. So, you know, that directly has to do with that position and responsibilities. And those were kind of things that were spread out before that we've kind of re-centralized, you know, with Marcy and now with Deb being here too, so.
Yeah. Another thing I was gonna mention is, you know, number one, over the years that I've sat here, we have been very lucky to have good candidates for deputy clerks. And I know our ordinance states now that the clerk appoints their own deputy, but maybe that needs to just be changed to where they selected, just like with the mayor of his appointments, that it has to be sanctioned by the council, just so that it's done properly, and that we do have, again, you know, down the road, as good of deputy clerks as we've had in the past.
Actually, that ordinance that we adopted in February of 18 did address that and removed that power. So
Well,
the question is, where are we gonna go with that power if we go back to the city clerk appointed to that position? What powers will that city clerk have in relation to the deputy clerk, including the appointment?
I think
We
the
can work
appointment,
through that.
for them, I think they're the ones that are ultimately responsible. I think future councils should be looking at what that clerk suggests, you know, and I'm sure Administrator Warfield or whoever would be in his position down the road in the future, that they would help make that recommendation, but it should be the council that makes that decision at the end and just ratifies it. And that should be pretty much where it goes. At least that's how I feel about it.
Alderman Schaefer?
What would be the reasoning for both? We've been fine with just one or the other. Is there a reason to have both? It just seems redundant.
Well, some of it is an example when Doug was gone at the last meeting, and we had to find someone from another community to fill in for us, or if she was gone for an extended period of time.
Well, we can appoint a backup. That's not an issue. We just didn't do
That's
it.
true. We have a deputy.
No, you can have 2 deputy clerks.
Sorry, I had to say that. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, sure, had we not been able to find a deputy clerk elsewhere to come in, and I'm sure that we would have had someone that we could have found to do it, but we just didn't, we don't have that mechanism in place right now to be able to
Because it seems to me that the city clerk here has grown into or morphed into a position of more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a formal thing as opposed to an actual duty or type thing.
Depends on the municipality. If it's an appointed city clerk, were you appointed? That was appointed as a city clerk before, then it's a full-time position.
Right.
Responsible to probably the mayor in most communities or president, as opposed, if it's a full-time gig as opposed to somebody that's an elected official.
But that's what you explained
Right.
between the different, who was before Janice again?
Kathy.
Kunzer. Yeah, Kathy Kunzer was a working clerk, and Janice wasn't, she had
Right.
a job. So it morphed at that stage.
Right.
Out of a working clerk to a non-working clerk, formal position. She didn't even do the minutes, right?
Janice did.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it's gotten away from that, so you could, so there, I think what you're suggesting is it goes back to a more working city clerk, which means the salary is gonna have to probably be adjusted, and we need to do that before the election, well before it.
So are you saying that it should be a full-time position?
No, that's your guys' decision.
Okay, I'm wondering what you were
No,
suggesting.
No, that's what I thought Alderwoman Condon was suggesting, is that it's more of a, you're responsible for all this paperwork. Well, if they are, then they're actually looking at it and knowing what it is. I don't think that was true with formal clerks.
And that's quite a bit of difference than what Carolyn just explained is how our city clerk would be compensated today.
Right.
Correct.
That's a formal position that
Because
is
we have a deputy clerk that fills the
the
clerk role.
detail.
The day-to-day responsibility.
That was my point in asking, what do we need both for?
Well, isn't that a little bit like asking, why do we need a mayor and a city administrator? Mayor's an elected position, and city administrator basically.
The answer.
Works.
Excuse me, actually, Jeff had the floor, I had my hands up, let's.
Alderman Condon.
I think Alderman Schaefer's point is well taken. And I guess what I have seen in the course of years that, and you're right, Derek, it has swung back and forth. I think it would be most efficient, and it holds the person accountable, if it is an elected official, and they are, whether it's part-time or full-time, at least part-time, and then maybe there's, I mean, there does have to be somebody full-time on staff that can be accountable for, freedom of information and several other duties that are done on a day-to-day basis. Ideally, I think a full-time paid city clerk, that's gonna hold them accountable. You know, how many, some of you may not remember, but we had years of minutes that weren't done on time. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but certainly months. And that's not efficient. And having one person here taking the minutes, another person typing them up, that there's a lot lost in translation. And I think having a full-time, I know money's an issue, but honestly, I think the most efficient way and the most motivated way is to have a full-time city clerk paid position. If that's not what's gonna happen, then maybe a part-time city clerk, certainly be having a higher salary, of course, and compensation, and deputy clerk that fills in between, but I think things have gone amiss over the years. We've made up, we've made do, everything's worked, but is it the most professional and the most efficient? I would question that.
Alderman Glenn?
As long as Alderwoman kind of brought it up, as far as, where minutes were late and everything else at times in the past. And maybe that needs to be looked at as far as with the position, that our ordinances reflect the fact that maybe the council could would step in at any specific time of any nature to,
Not if they're elected.
not if they're
And that's the
elected.
concern that we had last time. Luckily, this person gave up the position, but we
Right.
couldn't get minutes for a
Right.
long time.
But what I'm getting at is if the clerk could, well, they throw the suggestion for the appointment of the deputy clerk, it would still be under the realm of the council for the deputy
You
clerk.
could keep control over the appointment of deputy clerk.
Which would at least therefore be able to continue to
Backstop.
make sure.
That's your
Yeah,
backstop.
exactly.
To the bad clerk.
Yeah, that's all. You know, just a balance and check, that's all. I think that would be a good idea. But I do like the idea of the election.
So what I'm hearing is that we will work on the appointment, bring an appointment back to the city council. We'll work on a draft of a revision of this ordinance that works with that appointment, reinstates the powers of the clerk to some degree the city council agrees with. And the remaining issues will be discussed again with the next city council soon. Is that
Right. Sanjay?
We'd be appointing a city clerk or a deputy clerk.
City.
Okay, so we still have our deputy clerk that will be retiring soon. So there has to be,
That's gonna be replaced.
that has to be replaced.
And they're working on that right now.
Yes.
Okay, and then I guess the only other thing I would put into it is I do like the option of number 3, where we're looking at some point of possibly electing again in 2021, because the activity level for the clerk's position was quite low in the last couple elections that I can recall. Why not putting it forth as a referendum first? That was option number 3, that was mentioned, that you had mentioned. Now, that's an option too. I'll just leave it at that. We're giving the voters a chance to speak on that, to city clerk or no city clerk.
Okay, so we'll take care of the emergent issue of filling the vacancy and bring it back to the city council. Okay?
Anything else? Perfect, thank you. Next item in the agenda is staff reports. Is there any staff reports this evening? Mayor and city council comments. Happy birthday, Sharon. I know the day late, right?
Nice.
Should have called, sorry. And then, I think that's it for me. And then city council comments, Alderman Santee.
Yeah, just an announcement, next Tuesday, the 9th, at 6 PM is Public Works Committee meeting. Any concerns, or please reach out to Public Works Director Schmidt if there's any concerns about the meeting, the time, or what have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Condon?
Yes, there's also, next Monday, a community development committee meeting.
Thank you. Any other city council comments? I see none. Looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Alderman Santee,
I'll make that motion.
second. Alderman Glad.
I'll make that motion.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Santee,
Yes.
Alderman Glad.
Yes.
Alderman Schaper,
Yes.
Alderman Curry.
Yes.
Alderman Mahalik.
Yes.
Alderman Devine.
Yes.
Alderwoman Cack.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. Have a good evening.